All right, so we are now live and recording. Hello and welcome everyone to the Youth Voices webinar series presented by the Youth Mentoring Action Network. My name is Isabella Adan Chavez, and I'm here today just to help facilitate the beginning and end of this webinar. The focus is going to be for young people to be able to share their voices and share their perspectives in order for the benefit of everyone watching out there. Today's focus is going to be on Asian American perspectives as it relates to COVID-19, as it relates to racism and other isms that we're seeing in our society. And I hope that you get a lot out of it. So I will turn the mic over to Jerry Feng, who will then take us through our introductions of all of our webinar panelists.
All right, thank you, Isabella. So good afternoon, everyone, or whenever you're watching this. My name is Jerry Feng, and I am a senior at Etiwanda High School in the Southern California region. And so the reason why we're hosting this panel today actually started from a couple of weeks ago when I was so lucky and fortunate to be invited to do a panel on the general experience of the youth during the pandemic. And so there we talked a lot about how our local officials, people of influence and power, and adults can help us, the youth who are experiencing this pandemic, and what ways they can do to help their community. And so something I said there was, I guess, sparked and ignited this idea of how these Asian Americans specifically are being affected by this pandemic, given a lot of the recent news with racism and xenophobia. And so that's why we're here today. And I was, again, lucky and fortunate and blessed, again, to be invited here to host this panel with our wonderful panelists, talking about and discussing what the Asian Americans or Asians across the entire world are feeling and experiencing. And so that's pretty much what we're going to be doing today. And we really hope, I'm very excited that we can get some good discussions going on and bring a positive impact to our communities. And next we can go over to, we'll just go down from Amy, and then we can go up to Oliver and then Jacob.
Okay, hi guys, my name is Amy Tan. I'm currently a junior at Irvine High School, and that's in Irvine. And my goal for the future and in college is to study something in the humanities, probably like public policy or psychology. And yeah, thank you.
Brian, are you there? Is your
Yes,
mic?
sorry. Hey guys, my name is Mingwei Zhu, or you can call me Brian. I'm currently a senior at Los Osos High School, and I'll be going to UCLA next fall, studying for political science. I'm super excited about that. I was originally from China, and I have extensive knowledge of the situation over there, and I think I can bring a pretty interesting perspective today. Looking forward to it.
Hi everyone, my name's Melissa. I currently am a junior at Palos Verdes Peninsula High School in the Palos Verdes area. In the future, I hope to be a biomedical researcher or something in the medical field.
Hello everyone, my name is Oliver. I'm a current student at Harvard Law School, just finishing up my first year here at home. I would love to go into civil rights or human rights, and I also recognize I am not in high school, so my perspective will be a little bit different from everybody else's here.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Tammy. I'm a senior at Etiwanda High School in SoCal, and I was born and raised Asian American in a very ethnically vibrant Vietnamese household. So very, very excited to be here and to have this conversation today. I was supposed to be studying at Swarthmore College even before the summer ended, being a biochemistry major with an economics minor, but obviously, those plans are a little bit put off right now. I have a strong background in the sciences and in leadership, so I think I'll bring a really cool perspective to today's conversation, just because we are in a global health crisis, and the way our leaders are dealing with the situation is very interesting. So excited to be here and to talk with everyone.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacob Azurin. I'm a senior at Etiwanda High School. This fall I'll be studying chemical biology at UC Berkeley, and my ethnic background is Filipino American.
Go Bears.
Go Bears.
Yes, so as you guys can all see, a lot of our panelists, though we all have this one thing in common, or actually quite a few things in common. We're all very interested in helping out our community, whether it's through science or through civil rights or through history, political science, public policy. And our panelists all come from different walks of life, some on the East Coast in college, some coming from China a few years back, and many different ethnicities here. So we really hope to bring a diverse perspective to what we're discussing today. Okay, and so for our first question, anyone please feel free to answer, but it will be, how have perceptions of the COVID-19 virus affected you and your community? Or how have you personally been affected by this pandemic?
I guess I'll start. So, like many of the panelists here, our personal lives have obviously been affected because there are a lot of cancellations and events that we probably have been looking forward to in a long time. But it goes beyond that to say that it is necessary to cancel those things to provide safety for the majority of people, and especially the immunosuppressed and the elderly. Specifically my perspective of the changes in the community. In my community, it is largely Asian American, so I don't see a lot of personal racism here or personal discrimination, which I find very fortunate to be a part of this community, in which I can feel safe to voice my opinions. And another community that I am a part of is the medical community. So I currently am a volunteer at Harbor UCLA Medical Center, as well as I do research at City of Hope Medical Center. And so I was surrounded by a lot of doctors and nurses and the medical staff before they went on social distancing and quarantine. So in that period where people were still discussing whether or not to shut down volunteers or medical researchers and prevent them from coming into the hospital, I saw a lot of discrimination that was already happening, especially towards doctors who are overworking themselves, trying to provide a safe environment for their patients. Specifically, there was a patient who told a doctor that he didn't want to be treated by him because of that he was a high-risk person and he didn't want to be treated by someone who was likely to give him the disease. So that was very unfortunate that happened, and I am here to hopefully contradict some of that stigma that's been around Asian Americans.
Okay, I'll continue off from Melissa's point about the medical part. So a part of my community, we're the Filipino American community. A big part of us are in like the health field. A lot of us are in the nursing, and I think that's pretty much affected us because I know a lot of friends whose parents have put many hours overworking at hospitals, and yet we still get sort of treated in a certain way because of our appearance of being Asian American. And I find it kind of interesting how we're kind of put in the situation of trying to help out with the COVID-19 situation, yet still being discriminated just because of our appearance. And that's kind of what I have to say about that part.
Yeah, going off of what Jacob said a little bit, I also came from a community that is majority Asian American, both here in Irvine or in Boston. So thankfully, I haven't seen a lot of the discrimination or violent attacks that other Asian Americans have seen around the country. But that being said, there has been microaggressions that made me a little bit uncomfortable. For example, earlier this year, back in January actually, before the virus really spread a lot, I was at the University Medical Center in law school, and I was getting on the elevator, and this nurse comes on, and she says, "You're not coughing, right?" And I said, "No." And she said, "So it's safe to get onto the elevator with you." Now that seems a little bit normal, but back in January, I remember that made me feel very uncomfortable because really China was the only place that had an outbreak, and she had targeted me as someone who she should be careful of just because I look like I might be from China. And sure, you know, I was born in China, I moved here from China, but I haven't been back to China in years. And her being a nurse certainly made that space feel a lot less welcoming and a lot less safe for me. And also I wanted to talk a little bit about my community. I think the majority of us are never going to face a outright incident of violence or racism, the way that Chinese Americans or Asian Americans might have felt in the past. But I think really what's important and what's going to be significant in the future is how we as a community respond to this. We have a president who's calling this a Chinese virus. We have white supremacists who are, using this as an opportunity to attack Asian Americans. And, we could just not respond, or we could, stay silent, or we could use this as an opportunity to organize and to, respond to what the president says, and to protect our fellow community members, and also to raise medical supplies and donations and make a stand. So hopefully that's the direction we take as a community, and I think that's going to be what's going to be significant in history.
Right. To build off what all of our to build off what he said, I haven't been really because during quarantine we couldn't really go out there and to engage with the community. But when school is in session, I definitely seen not a lot of discrimination, but definitely examples of discrimination even within my school. I come from a relatively diverse community, Rancho Cucamonga in Southern California, where the Asian population is around 20%, which is pretty diverse. But there's definitely cases of like subtle racism that we can see in school. I have this friend who is currently a junior, and back in January when school was still in session, he wore a face mask every single day to school for his own safety concern, of course, and for not getting the virus and whatnot. I thought it was a really clever idea to do that, because you're putting yourself less at risk and you're putting others less at risk. So I thought that was a really good idea, but people around me were joking at him, mocking him for wearing a mask, and he was obviously discriminated by his race because he's Asian, and he also came from China, and people were just laughing at him because he was wearing a mask when there was literally back in January like 2 cases in the US, and there was like no need to wear a mask. But I just felt really, really bad, and I felt that in his space, he definitely felt really discriminated against by these words and these statements targeted at him just because his race and just because what he's wearing. And when he's trying to protect himself from the virus or from potentially contracting the virus, he was discriminated against because of who he is. And I think that's really something that I think the panel will be discussing today, and that's something that we need to address more as a community.
I think there are like very like extreme ends to the situation. So a part of my community is kind of coming together. Like, I don't know if you guys use this app called Nextdoor, but a lot of people are like trying to help each other out on Nextdoor. For example, my mom bought like a lot of face masks on eBay before the pandemic spread widely, and we don't really need that many because we're not going out to work and school has been like canceled. So like when people ask if we have like N95 face masks on Nextdoor, we like put it out like in front of our tree so they can come and pick it up. And it made me feel like nice knowing that I could give back to the community and help those who are in need. But at the same time, there are some people in our community that are like not responding really well to this whole entire pandemic. For example, my grandma was going for a walk the other day, and then my neighbor who lives like right down the street told her to go away when she got too close to his house. And then she came back like pretty upset, and she was talking about it to me. And then I was actually born in Wuhan, and a lot of my family is still back in Wuhan, and a lot of them are actually nurses and doctors, so they have to be in the front line battling the disease and then helping those who are in need. And seeing the pictures they sent and what they're going through has definitely changed my view on the whole pandemic, and how lucky I am to be in this neighborhood. We're not directly affected by the virus. Yeah.
I think for a lot of us who live in Southern California, we're very fortunate enough to be in a geographically diverse area where we don't see as many cases of this microaggression, this outright violence. But I definitely heard a lot of stories, and I definitely know that depending on where you live, what your background is, and the people you interact with in your community directly, the responses to COVID-19 and the responses to us being like an Asian American community has been like very different. And sometimes like this microaggression like manifests in very, I guess, subtle ways that a lot of people don't realize just because a lot of it happens online. I think Brian was mentioned that since we are practicing social distancing and we are, putting that responsibility on ourselves, we don't interact with as many people. But then on the flip side of it, a lot of people are taking, their opinions and their microaggression and I guess their xenophobia and bigotry online and, acting on that platform to like, spread this negativity, which I think is very undeserving to like the Asian American community, just because like, as everyone else, we are going through this pandemic as well, just because it's a global thing. So in terms of like how the youth has been affected, I feel as though, we are just going through it as anyone is going through it, even more so than adults, just because like we live in this time where we're so used to being connected with everyone. And then now like we're not as connected anymore. And then on top of that, we see like this microaggression, this negativity being directed towards us as well.
Yeah, those are all some really, really, really good points. I don't think I could have said it any better than you guys. But so for our viewers, it seems like the general consensus of all the panelists here is that we are very fortunate and lucky and blessed to be living in areas where diversity has pretty much, we have all integrated into society together. But that's still not to say that we don't see hints of microaggression like Oliver has mentioned in some of his experiences. But even in some other places like in New York, as diverse as New York is with so many different, one block changing two different blocks could give you like 3 different nationality neighborhoods. And even places like in New York, they have racist attacks, xenophobia. So it's definitely something we need to pay attention to. And one thing that I really think Oliver brought up, important fact was that us Asian Americans, we could stay silent, we could just stay at home, but this is our time and our chance to make sure that we make things right. And whether that's protesting, whether that's advocating for each other, supporting the vulnerable, it's very important for us and for our viewers as well to be supporting us. And so some things that we've seen regarding the coronavirus in the media. So over here, we just see a few memes and TikToks. So some of these are pretty funny. I think some of them is saying like an Asian student walks into class and then the whole class is like, oh shoot, we need to, he should be having a face mask, or everyone feels super protective. But this Asian student could pretty much not even be from China, could be from, the Philippines, could be from Indonesia. But still getting treated the same way. And some of these other ones with the comedians joking about stereotyping Asians with the coronavirus, things like that. So for our panelists, what have we seen in the media?
I think the biggest thing that I've seen over this past month has been the administration, especially the president, calling the coronavirus not by its official name, COVID-19, nor coronavirus, but instead calling it as a Chinese virus, and spreading rumors about the possibility of the virus originated from a Chinese laboratory and produced by the Chinese government and dispersed it in the United States. And I think that is quite disheartening for me to see, just because that he is shifting the attention and the blame away from himself and away from the lack of action that his administration has been doing over the past few months, and putting in other international organizations and other communities around the world. And that raised a lot of questions in my heart that Mr. President will have been doing the entire month of February, when we have a month to prepare, but we completely ignore the fact that there is a rising possibility of a pandemic and we're still going about our day like nothing is going to happen. And I think that from that Chinese virus call really radiates a lot of racism around the country, because I've seen just a lot of people resonating what the president has said online, retweeting about the Chinese virus name. And I think that from that tweet that President Trump tweeted out, I think a lot of people felt that it is confident and it is right that we shift the blame on Chinese people and shift the blame on Asian Americans because it is their fault. And I think that the leadership has definitely bring the the attention of the country to a more racist direction.
I think the difficult situation that we find ourselves in is that no one was prepared for this exactly, especially like our country and like our administration. And I think that when we should have been proactive, now like on the flip side, we've like become reactive instead. And that's a very hard thing to do, especially when like we're trying to fight something that, you know, a lot of people don't necessarily believe in, thinks is a hoax, but in reality it is like a public health concern and it's a global pandemic. And I think also the fact that like it's an intangible like problem that we were dealing with as a society that is like really hard for people to wrap their minds around and completely understand. And then the way that like it's being portrayed in social media and like the way that our leaders were portraying it. As I said, it's very easy to, you know, be online, be engaged in that community and, you know, tweet something, like something, and then not fully understand what, you know, where it came from, if the source was like, you know, a reliable source, if it's even true, things like that. So the way it's being portrayed in social media is like, again, like an injustice to, you know, the reality of the situation and the reality of who's responsible, which in actuality, I think like really there's no one to blame. And that's what people are like kind of struggling with because we want someone to blame.
Yeah, and the thing is that we're still teens and we're still students, and whenever we see those jokes, we don't want to be like that person who can't take jokes, and we don't want to be like getting really heated for it, and people are gonna be like, oh, she's just overreacting, and she like it's a funny joke. I don't know why she's like flipping out about it, and like oftentimes when we see those jokes, we want to seem like, you know, chill about it, so we try to like turn ourselves away from it or turn a blind eye to it and like try to ignore or even laugh along with the joke. And I feel like at a certain point we cannot do that anymore. We need to actually speak up for ourselves and for other people in our community. If we keep laughing along with the jokes, it's not going to get any better and nothing will be solved. And like at a certain point, these jokes are like just like purely insensitive and harmful, and in no way are they funny in any way. And yeah.
Yeah, so for me, definitely, I really agree with what Amy has mentioned about like the jokes and things. And to be quite honest, some of them are really funny. They do bring a good laugh, especially during this time of quarantine. But I think what's important for us to know is that um, these jokes aren't helping to spread positive information, and they could be spreading a lot of misinformation, inaccurate information about what this virus is, how do we prevent it, and things like that. And it's very easy for us teenagers and even just adults to just see what we believe on screen without having official documentation, whether it's from like the CDC, which news outlet it's from. It's just really easy for us to kind of I guess believe like the first thing we see. And one of my friends, actually, I saw this on Instagram the other day, and it kind of got me a little bit frustrated. And he said he put like this like question like box. I think it was like a poll. He's like, "How should we punish China for this virus?" And I was just like, how can you put a blame on a virus? No one wants a global pandemic. No one wants a virus to kill and infect millions of people, kill hundreds of thousands. And so how could you be putting a blame on a specific country? Right now, what we should be doing is showing solidarity, showing unity with the different nations on this planet, and show that we are all in this together. And it was just frustrating seeing that comment, but and the thing is, he's not like even like right wing, not even left wing. He's his own thing, and that kind of scares me even more. Is that the moderates are the people believing this misinformation, and we need to make sure that we spread positive information. But yeah, and I think on the next slide we have we got a quote from one op-ed from the New York Times. And so I'm just going to read it right now. And so the title of this op-ed is "The Slur I Never Expected to Hear in 2020." And it's by Kathy Park Hong. And she is an Asian American who's kind of explaining and talking about her experience living in this pandemic. And so she said, one quote said, "I never would have thought that the word and then the anti-Asian slur would have a resurgence in 2020. It still thrived among bottom feeders on the internet, but I hadn't heard it directed at me since I was in my 20s. But now I was encountering that word every time I hear about an anti-Asian incident or hearing about its use from friends. I couldn't process the fact that Asians were hurling that slur at us so openly and with such raw hate. In the past, I had a habit of minimizing anti-Asian racism because it had been drilled into me early on that racism against Asians didn't exist. And I think this really relates to us because we grow up fortunately, in a society where people are more integrated, more educated, have more experience with different cultures, especially in the coasts of the United States. And we would never expect to hear anti-Asian slurs. And so this is just one thing. So how do you guys see this? What stood out to you in this quote, I guess? And please feel free to take your time. And just for some thought, I guess, there have been a lot of different targets for scapegoating. And so back in, or I don't know exactly when, but I definitely read some of these articles online. There were stories of people being murdered and beat up in the streets in London for a person who wasn't even Chinese, he was Singaporean. And then there was a family in Texas, Burmese American, who were getting attacked, and 2 children of the family actually were murdered by white supremacists who were putting this blame on them. And it's important because these people, firstly, you shouldn't even be scapegoating a certain ethnicity group or singling out a certain nationality for something that they have no control over. But now that this is spreading just like the virus and impacting people who aren't even Chinese, just people who look yellow-skinned, have the similar features, or speak a language that they can't even decipher the difference between. And so maybe that's something that can help you guys think about how this can relate to us.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. I really agree. I wanted to comment on the last sentence of this quote a little bit. It certainly is a very widespread notion that racism towards Asian Americans doesn't really exist. But to be honest, the fact that we're seeing more and more anti-Asian slurs today doesn't really surprise me, because if we look at the experiences of a lot of the other people of color communities around the country, I mean, and look at our own history, the racism that Asian Americans have faced, it really doesn't come as a surprise, especially with the president we have today. To be sure, the kind of discrimination and the kind of racism that Asian Americans face today is different from the racism that other groups might face. I think a lot of our challenges has to do with people generalizing us into one community when Asian Americans are incredibly diverse. People thinking that, you know, Asian American communities have the same needs when, you know, different communities have different nationalities, different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds. So that's a big part. And the other is the model minority myth. This idea that Asians are supposed to be successful, that because we're successful, then obviously it's not the society's fault, it's not the system's fault, it is those other groups' fault that they're finding less success, as defined by the dominant group here. And that hurts, that certainly hurts other groups, but that hurts us in a lot of ways too. First of all, it makes our successes less meaningful, right? All of you guys here today have worked incredibly hard to be where you are. But if this model minority myth pervades, then your achievements are much less meaningful. And people don't really appreciate all the hard work. They don't respect you for all the work you put into getting where you are. And also, it does also hurt those of us who are less privileged, those of us whose parents did not go to college, who aren't, you know, working in STEM or working as a lawyer or some kind of really prestigious position. Those people get doubly screwed because they have all these high expectations and they're getting less aid, whether it be from society or from government or from, you know, nonprofits. So yeah, this idea that Asian American racism doesn't really exist and that we, you know, we have to be surprised when it pops up. I don't know. I think I've always thought that is something we should fight. And I'll end on this. This is a really funny anecdote I saw actually on YouTube. This is my one contribution to the slide previously. So recently, these tapes came out from Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon speaking back when Nixon was president. And what had happened was the UN had just voted to recognize China instead of Taiwan as the one of the big five permanent members of the Security Council. And a lot of African nations had voted on China's side. And we tend to think of Reagan as one of the best presidents, someone who, you know, even if he had a lot of policies that really negatively impacted minorities, they were innocently racist. Well, this tape just dispelled all of those notions. It just came out like Reagan was like, said something just horrible. And I, you know, if you're sensitive, I recommend turning off the speaker for a bit. But what he said was basically, oh, to see all of these monkeys. I mean, they still looked uncomfortable wearing shoes on the floors of the UN. And he was describing those delegates from the African countries. And I was very shocked because I had always thought Reagan was that innocently racist type. But reading through the comments, a lot of African Americans had commented and they were like, none of us are surprised. I mean, we always knew it was there. We're just glad the tapes came out. And I think that's also the kind of mindset we should have when it comes to Asian American racism.
So I came to America when I was 11, so I was in 5th grade. And at that time, like I was the only person in my family who spoke like somewhat fluent English. So like my entire family relied on me to like translate for them. And I was embarrassed to, I regret admitting that now, but like I was really embarrassed to do that for them in public. I felt embarrassed speaking a language that was not spoken by the people around me. I was scared they were going to react negatively or, you know, have some like, you know, racist sentiment towards me. And I was scared of bringing like Asian or like Chinese food to school because I didn't want to be different. I wanted to blend in with the Americans and to not stand out as an Asian American and Chinese. And I wanted to, you know, just be normal at that time. But now, like, I am proud to be translating for my mom in public and to help her out with language and stuff. And I'm no longer ashamed to bring my like own ethnic food to school because I feel like the more we are ashamed of who we are in our own like race, in our own community, the more we allow other people to, you know, kind of like, you know, not allow us to have our voice in society and to cast a shadow over our achievements. And we shouldn't be ashamed of ourselves being Asian at this time. If anything, we should be proud that we're Asian Americans. We should be united, not to point the finger at each other. Like, you know, Asian Americans in America shouldn't be pointing fingers at the Asian Americans, the Asians in China or in other countries. We should come together and not, you know, try to blame anyone else and to be proud of who we are.
Amy, these comments are on fire.
I agree.
They really are. They really are. And I actually relate a lot to Amy just because I am Vietnamese American, born and raised. I was born in the US, but my family raised me with Vietnamese as my first language. So when I started kindergarten, like I spoke zero English. So I definitely relate with Amy, you know, not coming from like a heavily English fluent family background and, you know, interacting with, you know, all of these students in the school setting. You know, it's very difficult already. But having that experience, I feel like everyone in the Asian American community can relate to some form, some way with that experience, just because we come from such like ethnically and nationally diverse backgrounds, even though we share that common Asian American experience. And it speaks to the fact that like we should be, you know, in solidarity and expressing some form of unity in the fact that, you know, this racism and this discrimination does exist against Asian Americans, even though not a lot of us realize that or acknowledge that, and even, realize that it exists. Just because, like, I feel like we don't really talk about it, and that's the issue. And that's why, like, it's very valuable, the conversation we're having today, just because I know that, like, we share a lot of those experiences, just because, as the quote says, like, it's this unspoken racism that, no one really talks about, but does exist. And we see that it does exist because it's, like, manifesting right now in this era of fear, in which, people are acting upon their fear. And fear spreads very quickly, and it leads to violent actions, as we've seen in the news, stuff we've seen in the media, even though, again, fortunate for us, we haven't experienced that in SoCal quite as much.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to like follow up with what Tammy and Amy said. Obviously, I said before, I was born in China and I came here 8th grade. I came here with some foundation of English, but literally no foundation of the American culture. So I remember, like, looking back, it was really just terrible to think how racist it was. But at the moment, I didn't really realize how much it meant, like, culturally. But I was just chilling in my classroom, trying to make friends and whatnot. And then this kid came up. He was like, "So, do Chinese people actually eat dogs?" Um, Now that I think about it, looking back, it was a really, really racist comment, and I think that it really reflects a lot of, like, cultural phenomena that we have in as a society today. That a lot of racism aren't directly explicit to us, but rather really implicit. They're, like, ingrained in the sentences they speak, or the tone they speak to us, or like the ways they treat us, they look at us. It's really implicit, but you can kind of decipher and tell that they're being subtly racist if you pay attention to them. And I think that makes it hard to, like, truly unite and identify that as a racism, to be like, as an explicit racism, because it's such a subtle trait that it's hard to tackle. And I think that, as the New York Times person said that she is surprised to hear these slurs, I think that these slurs have always been there, but they've been a lot more implicit throughout the recent histories rather than explicit. And I think that, like, we shouldn't be surprised, because we've all, I'm sure, experienced this somewhere, somehow, whether it's, like, shopping at the mall, or like going with your family out to eat dinner and why not. There definitely has been moments where you feel like the person is treating you differently because of the way you speak a different language, or you dress differently, or you eat with chopsticks rather than fork and knife and why not. And I think that there's a lot of subtle traits that people express rather than explicit. And I think that we shouldn't be surprised, but at the same time, we need to unite and tackle the situation, because it is really impacting us as a community as a whole.
Yeah, Brian, thank you so much. That leaves us on a very good note for our next question. So why is there continued racism and xenophobia despite so many decades of education and integration, the civil rights movements, the 60s and 70s, all of our progress? Why do we still continue to see this? And we haven't really heard much from Melissa and Jacob. Do you guys have anything? Feel free to take time to answer, but I just want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to speak.
Okay, I'll start off. So I think a big reason why there's been a lot of like racism and xenophobia, despite like education and stuff like that, is because it's become kind of sort of like a trend right now. I've seen that on social media, like such things like TikTok and maybe Instagram, where they're kind of poking fun at like the whole coronavirus situation, and associating it with the Asian Americans, especially with like the whole like idea of like the bat soup or whatever. And it's kind of been like relating around like as sort of like a joke, and people get the misconception that like, oh, it's just like all fun and games, so it shouldn't be that bad. I'll post it on the internet, and it'll be fine from there. And it's kind of sort of like also the idea of like the term of clout chasing, where people are trying to get popular and like accepted towards society by posting these sort of things, although they're not kind of being aware that it's putting other people down for their own good. And I also want to touch on like the topic of like they probably would have maybe not done it in person because they have the whole protection of being online, where some people can say more horrid and like explicit racial terms against Asian Americans, and they don't and they think they can get no consequences with it because they are online and they can't really, and like they expect like Asian Americans to not really fight back. And I think that's what I've been seeing on social media.
So going off of what he also said, I feel like the form of racism and xenophobia that we've seen throughout the past century has changed shape in the way that it's being expressed. So definitely in like the beginning of the 20th century, we see a lot of racism in the form that like not online and what it has been today, because now that it is online, it can be said that it's going to affect even more people because anyone with any sort of device can access this type of and see all these racist comments and things like TikTok that are being made. And it's, I want to say it's definitely not, it's definitely less violent throughout the decades, but it does spread to a lot more people. So it's just a matter of getting people to be conscious of what they're saying, what they're putting out there, that can actually have a direct impact on people, even though they don't realize it at the moment that they're making content or stuff like that, because it is like 2020 and there is a lot more of this happening surrounding like social media and the way we express it.
Yeah, to add to that a little bit, I think there's two primary forms of racism, and there's a strong reason why both are still so pervasive today. The first type is the kind that we've been talking about, which is the innocent racism. The people who grew up, you know, who didn't have any friends who were Asian American, who didn't have any African American friends, didn't have any Latino friends, didn't have any LGBTQ friends. And in a way, that makes me think it's almost natural, or at least it's easy to be racist, because you know we tend to have stereotypes of people who are different from us. So that's the first type, and I think as the U.S. gets more diverse, as millennials and the Gen Z become a bigger part of the population, I think that will start to go away. The other type is something that we're going to have to fight harder for and fight harder against, and that is the people who use racism consciously for their self-benefit. And I think a great example of this is employers. You know, if they can get away with paying, say, let's pick Asian Americans, if they can get away with paying Asian Americans $80 when they would pay another worker $100, and all of them do the same thing, that gives them a huge advantage. Essentially, the employers have a monopoly where they all agree to pay a certain race less. And that race can do nothing about it because the employers have a monopoly. And so there's a very, very real economic incentive for them to keep that up, to discriminate in their hiring practices, in their pay practices, in terms of forcing workers, you know, to do arbitration instead of pursue lawsuits, in terms of hiding salaries from workers so they can't compare. All of these are systems in the structure that, or you know, all of these have been put in place in the system to kind of make the employers and make all these very rich and powerful interests more rich and powerful. And I wanted to close my contribution out in a kind of a positive way, which is I've always felt like being a minority is in a way a privilege. Like Amy said earlier, since moving to this country at first, I was very, very ashamed of being Chinese. There was all this subtle microaggressions growing up. It was also a time when the Chinese Communist Party was doing a lot of unsavory things, and I just didn't want to be associated with China in any way. You know, I tried so hard to be as American as possible. And as I grew older, I found more and more things I love about my heritage, and I started realizing that, you know, what the government does in China doesn't define who I am as a Chinese American or as a Chinese person. more importantly, through this journey, first of all, I learned what I like about myself. I learned, how to overcome these challenges. I learned to balance my need to assimilate with, being proud of myself and being proud of my culture. And I think all of these important lessons have contributed so much to my success. It's made me more empathetic. It's made me more able to understand other people who are different from me. It's made me believe in myself more. And all of these are privileges that those who grow up in very monolithic societies, and those who are racist, those who don't take the effort to change the way they see other people, all of these are advantages that they will never get. And in a sense, they are the ones who are really suffering, because they're the ones who are losing touch with their humanity, but we're becoming more in touch with ourselves and the people around us.
Yeah, Oliver, that brings up a really, really good point. Definitely nothing. I expected nothing less from a Harvard Law student. But I think you mentioned something about how, like before too, when I was in elementary or like middle school and bringing lunch to school, kind of like Amy mentioned, is, with these chopsticks and everyone's like looking at you weird. And there's this, just give me a PB&J and then, a brown bag. I'm fine. And then now it's just like, I'm going to use chopsticks. All right. You're going to watch me use chopsticks. And even then, like nowadays, a lot of Americans even know how to use chopsticks now. It's like kind of weird to me, because when I was a kid, like it seemed like it was very exotic for non-Asians, I guess, to use chopsticks. And so that's one thing. And then another thing also was the fact about that some people, like you said, we are privileged. And some people are ashamed to be Asian, and they don't embrace that. And so I don't know if this is true, but I heard from my family members in some posts that Andrew Yang said in a tweet or like a post and something about how like he was ashamed to be Asian. And I think that was just like one of the biggest blows to our respect towards the candidate. He was at one point the beacon of hope for us Asian Americans, and to see one of these peoples that we so much look up to say that, and it's kind of demoralizing. And so it just continues to support those people who are going away from their heritage and supporting them moving away and not embracing their culture. And so for this next question, it kind of leads into it. So some of us are in organizations advocating for like rights of minorities. So what are some things that we can do to help out those people who are vulnerable, those people who feel shamed to be Asian or African American, Latino, and Latinx? So what can we do to help?
So I guess I'll start this question. So recently, four of us here are in an organization called Future Chinese Leaders of America that was founded by Oliver. And so now we have chapters.
Amazing organization, by the way.
So now we have chapters in Irvine, Diamond Bar, San Gabriel, and Palos Verdes. And what we're trying to do to help is to give a voice to young people, but not only that, is to give a platform for the younger generation to be able to help in this time that in any way that we can. So we hosted a fundraiser that let people donate to hospitals. Our first part of the fundraiser was in February, where we donated when the United States wasn't the leading country in the most number of affected coronavirus cases. And so we donated back to Wuhan, China, and we donated approximately $4,000, and that was a really great cause. And then when the US became the world leading in like the most number of coronavirus cases, which is still shocking to say, we decided to do something in America, because our organization is about bringing Asian Americans together. So we organize part 2 of our fundraiser through all of our chapters, and we promote the idea of helping residents who don't have as much access to supplies such as masks. So we were actually able to raise approximately 600 masks. We packaged them in packs of 20, and for the PV chapter, at least I know, we delivered them to homes while wearing like proper personal protective equipment. And then we received a lot of great feedback from those residents, and they were willing to help out in our fundraiser in the process to donate to hospitals. So it's a really great cause to see that it's a win-win situation when you have a surplus of masks, especially from the Asian American community. A lot of us have more access to that kind of equipment. We get to distribute those to people who need them, and especially in this time, it's mandatory now to wear masks outside when doing certain errands, and then they're willing in turn to help us fund for hospitals, and which is a really great thing to see. So being a part of this fundraiser, I just think it's amazing to see that you don't need to be a certain age to help out. You don't need to be a certain you don't need to have a certain amount of money. You don't need to anything really. You just need to be able to have the motivation to get out there and voice your opinion and say, hey, like, this is a time where we all need to come together and be united, and then something great can come out of that.
Yeah, just very quickly before someone else answers, just a disclaimer. So Oliver is the founder of the organization back, I think, it was like, it felt so short ago, but it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I think, 3, 4 years. And so Amy, 2016, yeah. And so we host a lot of different activities, inviting politicians and speakers, and trying to encourage, doing workshops too, and encouraging our population and encouraging the young Asian American population to be more aware of the issues surrounding them and to encourage them to be more involved. And so Amy is actually the president of the Irvine branch. I was the president before her of that branch, but now I opened the branch in Diamond Bar, and Melissa is the president in Palos Verdes. So we all work together to empower our people. And also, Melissa said $4,000, but it's not just the money. It was a lot of different supplies, some masks, some ventilators. So it was a range of different supplies. Yeah, just a disclaimer. But yeah, someone else can go ahead. Good answer, Melissa.
I really am amazed by all the work that you guys are doing, like in relation to you guys' organization, just because what you guys are doing is providing a platform for people. And I think that's what we really need and what we really like are trying to advocate for in this sort of situation, and especially when we're advocating for the rights of minorities, just because that platform, that connection, and that like network of people who are motivated to like, you know, make this change is very important, because like, you know, separately we can only do so much, but together getting connected with the right people, finding people who, you know, relate to your experiences, relate to your ideas, your opinion, try to make something tangible happen for a community and bringing about that tangible difference is really, really cool to see. And I think that, you know, we are on that right track, you know, band together as a community and start doing the little things that will eventually make a really big difference. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity and thank the organization to invite us all here and to join us in this panel and share our different perspectives on the situation today. And I think that although I'm not personally involved in the organization that's advocating for the rights of Asian Americans or minorities in general, and I definitely would love to join one in the future, because I think it's truly imperative for us to, you know, to unite together and tackle these situations head on. I just want to thank the organization for letting us have this kind of platform today and bring these kind of issue to the table and let, you know, the general public to see our point of view as well and to understand the situation from our perspective, so that we can be more of a united society as a whole and tackle the situation from a more cohesive perspective rather than a more divided perspective. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, so this question, we maybe kind of already talked a little bit about it in our other answers, so we don't need to spend too much time, but just maybe like one or two answers really quickly. How has been purchasing, you know, essential goods like food, groceries, maybe like paper for homework if we need to print, how has it been an issue kind of going out? And some of you guys can just quickly share some of your experiences.
The Friday of March 16th, I think the last day of school for us, unfortunately, I went to Costco in the morning, and then the line was just horrendously long. We like stood in a line for like about an hour just to get like milk and like toilet paper. And yeah, like buying like essential goods like milk has been a problem, also eggs. And I think that as my mom uses WeChat, and on WeChat there is a community where we can, pick up food at different mom's house, and like we can pick up food at this local park where,
Relatable.
yeah, and at this local park, and they will just bring chicken and like rice and anything we need. So it hasn't been a huge problem for purchasing food, but it's definitely been a problem purchasing at the actual grocery stores because first, safety concern, second, shortage of supplies we need, and yeah, that's my take on it.
I mean, I feel like it's definitely been a convenience for, I want to say, all of us in order to get like necessities and things that we usually get on a normal day-to-day basis, just because like going outside, going anywhere is so hard nowadays. But I definitely think it's more difficult for the people who are like definitely at risk if they go out. I know that I have grandparents who live in Orange County, so, they don't live like 5 minutes down the street from us. So, we're constantly worried about them because like we don't want them going outside since they are, more at risk since they're, a little bit older. But I have family down there, family and neighbors are totally, open to bringing them food. So like we know they're taken care of and we know they're doing well. But definitely trying to look out for those like vulnerable communities who, even though we're all experiencing inconvenience, they're experiencing like more of an inconvenience. And then on a more lighthearted note, I have a friend in NorCal, and we all know that nowadays, like commodities such as toilet paper is very hard to, obtain. And he told me the other day that his family tried to get toilet paper on Amazon for $90. And I was like, no way. And I guess it just goes to show like the crazy world that we live in right now, where toilet paper is bought online from Amazon for $90. But just the fact that these necessities that we're so used to just easily obtaining is not so easily obtainable anymore. So being more grateful for the stuff we have, I guess, definitely is becoming more of a trend.
Yeah, when Tammy said about the $90 of toilet paper, that made me think of all these people who are using this pandemic to their advantage to scam people. There are a lot of scammers out there. My mom got scammed $165 for the face mask she bought, and then all she got was this tiny package labeled toy mask. And a lot of people have been like receiving the same things and like suffering a similar like fate and of being scammed. And I think that's like really frustrating how there are people taking advantage of like all these innocent people who are dying to make profit for themselves. And I think that's very selfish as well. When my mom first had to like go out to like buy food, she had to write on her face mask that face mask for protection, not because she was infected. And I think that shows a lot about, the current situation.
Yeah, Jacob, I saw you trying to touch your mic for a while. Do you want to quickly share before we get to our last question or takeaways?
Yeah, so I'm kind of grateful enough to have parents that are young and healthy to go out and purchase necessities and stuff like that. But there are some times where I have to go purchase some stuff as well. And so there are some kind of moments where I just go out and driving, and I do kind of sometimes I get actually a couple days ago where I got like some stares when I was driving. And so those are some stuff that's made me uncomfortable a bit, but hasn't really too much been an issue. So I'm kind of grateful for that, I guess.
That's great. That's great. Okay, well, so it seems like the general consensus here is that our lives have all definitely been significantly impacted, whether that's positively, negatively, having more time at home. But we've definitely been noticing and seeing a lot more things happening in our world, in our society, against people of our color, our ethnicity, how we look. And it's very important for us for us leaders and potentially elected officials to make sure that we're doing the necessary steps to help out those who are vulnerable, who aren't as fortunate as some of us are to live in areas of diversity, to be in safe homes with roofs above our heads, and heaters when it's cold, and air conditioning when it's hot, like today. So just some takeaways for our allies, people who are watching this, our wonderful viewers. So the first thing is scapegoating issues is definitely not a solution. We cannot be putting the blame on China. We cannot be putting the blame on Italy or any other country who have been very heavily affected by this virus. And that just leads to more misinformation. And so the second point is kind of similar to what I just mentioned. Distributing accurate information is extremely imperative, and we must stay informed. So like what I mentioned earlier, misinformation is the key to lead to white supremacy or hatred and bigotry. So we must learn and see information from the most accurate sources. So the CDC, probably some other news outlets, but that's the one that we all mostly know, CDC. So that's the second one. The third point is that unity and not fear will keep us safe. And so right now, a lot of people across the entire world are fearful, they're anxious. What do? We are stuck at home. We are not getting paychecks. We need to buy food. We need to buy necessities like toilet paper, but are now like $90 online. So what are we gonna do? So in this time, we must stay united. We must show solidarity with one another in order to get through it. And another one added by, I think, Tammy. Do you want to kind of talk about it?
Yeah, I'll speak briefly upon it just because I was inspired by your first bullet point, scapegoating issues is not a solution. And I do agree, it's definitely not a solution. And, the point about, being part of the solution and not the problem kind of speaks about what we were talking about today, wrapping everything up, just because that's the reason why we're here, sharing our experiencing, sharing our perspectives, and just, being part of the conversation about spreading awareness, spreading, accurate information, and that will lead us to, understanding the problem and, taking steps to solve the problem rather than, creating more problems.
Yep, thank you, Tammy. And so for our last point for our allies is just to support those vulnerable communities. So those people who are who are low income, who have hardships, buying these necessities and groceries. Asian Americans who are being targeted innocently. And for all those nurses and doctors who are giving their life away to help these people get better in these hospitals, and to see them treated badly is something that we need to speak out against. And so these are our main takeaways for our viewers, elected officials, for people with influence and power, adults. We just really need your help and your unity and solidarity for us to be able to really make an impact and to make our society better. And so before I hand it back off to Isabella, I just want to say thank you so much to YMAN, the Youth Mentoring Action Network, for giving us this wonderful, wonderful opportunity to have this discussion, this privilege to be able to, have internet and talk through a Zoom meeting, and just to really spread positivity and talk about the issues that we're facing. So thank you so much, YMAN, for giving us this opportunity.
All right. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. My voice is a little bit raspy right now, so I apologize for that. But I just want to say thank you to all of the panelists. This has been so awesome. I personally know that I learned a ton watching y'all and listening to the conversation that you had. I added one little slide right here, which I'm not sure if it'll come up yet. At the end, no, okay, maybe not. That's okay, so I'll just put it back over here. So yeah, so we are the Youth Mentoring Action Network. I know that one of the panelists, you talked about wanting to join an organization that is currently interested in working with marginalized and minoritized youth communities. So we operate primarily in the Inland Empire, but we do work all over the country now, focused on bringing youth voices to the forefront, focused on changing the way that we imagine youth work. And this is just one of the ways that we do that, is trying to leverage our resources in order to make sure that spaces like this can exist. Yeah, so that'll be the end of our webinar. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. I'm actually going to stop the recording right now, and then we can chat a little bit about the webinar in just a second. So to all of our viewers, thank you. And we hope to see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, how's everyone doing? How do we feel?
Yay, that was great.
Good.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that was awesome. Thank you all so much for contributing and everything. I tried to add a slide at the end while you were talking that had the the resource for the organization that you work with. So what I'm going to do is add that when we post this and we send this out to everyone, we'll add your organization as well as the websites that are on there. On a more personal note, so I actually went to UC Riverside and I'm graduating with a degree in public policy with this emphasis on social and cultural policy as well as international policy. So for any of you who are interested in public policy, you want to know about like what different degree programs look like, or maybe you're interested in how it looks like in the UC system, I could definitely help you all out with that. But I'm just glad that y'all are interested in policy and you're interested in going into health and everything. For those of you that shared that, because we definitely need more young people to be entering these fields. I keep telling folks that like our entire world is going to be different after this whole pandemic eventually does slow down. Like y'all said, there's so much that we weren't prepared for, but I truthfully believe that everything that y'all said and the ideas that you're coming up with are going to dictate how the future looks like, right? So thank you so much for being leaders. I want to continue to invite you. Yeah, I want to continue to invite you to join upcoming webinars as panelists, as viewers. I know Jerry and I talked about the possibility of hosting more sorts of workshops and stuff, and which we can work on collaboratively, which we definitely will be doing, and I'll keep you on the loop on that. This Friday, we actually have a healthy relationships webinar going on. So we're teaming up with facilitators that talk about the essential components of healthy relationships and how to identify toxicity, how to identify abuse in your own relationships, as well as the relationships of other people. This is a part of our wellness collaborative. So we're trying to look at holistic wellness for young people as a means of, you know, achieving better academically, career-wise, and also just like personally and spiritually. So I'll definitely be keeping y'all in the loop about that. And you all are definitely welcome to be panelists on future webinars that we have. Yeah, just thank you again so much for giving your time and
Thank
your
you.
Thank you.
We had an amazing time.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to end the Zoom thing and I will definitely keep y'all in the loop for future webinars.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
stay
Thank you so
safe,
much.
everyone.
Alice, thank you,
All right.
Oliver,
Guys.
Amy,
Bye.
Mingwei,
Bye.
Jacob, Tammy, Melissa. Bye.